I am Nora Hale, and this is my voice. I live in America, in a brick house with a blue door on a quiet street near the lake in Chicago. The house has a creaky third stair and a walnut table that holds the rings of 1,000 coffee cups. 2 weeks ago, I sold my software company for $23 million. I signed the last page with a steady hand, and the wire hit my account before noon. I kept the receipt in the kitchen drawer beside rubber bands and a broken corkscrew, because even big moments should sit next to small things. Friends said I should rest, take a long trip to Europe, buy a new car and cash. Maybe I will. But first, I wanted to say goodbye to work the right way, with music, good food, and the people who stood with me when the code broke at 2 a.m. and when peril felt like a cliff. So, I planned a retirement party in Boston, where my oldest friend Grace runs a brownstone that glows at night like a warm lantern. The guest list felt like a map of my life. Grace was there, of course, graceful as her name. My brother Marcus flew in from Denver with his calm smile and a carry-on that never seems to age. My lawyer, Mr. Bennett, who only drinks club soda, arrived in a navy suit that fit like a rule. My son Eric came with his wife Vanessa, who wore a pale dress and a bright, careful smile. Vanessa's mother, Linda, joined them. She is the kind of woman who thanks waiters by name and straightens picture frames in other people's homes. I hired a jazz trio and tipped the pianist $200 because he played my mother's favorite song without being asked. The caterer set out salmon, small steaks, and little cups of lemon mousse that tasted like a clean bell. For a moment, the room was only light and sound and the hush that follows good news. Near 9 o'clock, I stood by the bar cart with a silver microphone and a full flute of champagne. I could see the whole room, the band, the guests, the gold thread in the curtains, and I could feel the small rush of a life turning over to its next page. I was ready to thank everyone and raise a glass to the future. That was when I saw it. Vanessa stepped up to the cart, her back half turned to the crowd. Her hand hovered over my flute for the length of a held breath. A pinch, a tilt, a soft motion like seasoning soup. In the light, I saw a faint shimmer fall into my drink, like dust in a sunbeam. It was quick and neat, the way a person does a thing they have practiced in their head. I did not gasp. I did not shout her name. I set the mic on the cart and walked over as if I were checking the label on the bottle. The room hummed behind me. I had built a company by staying calm when the server cried and by asking simple questions when others tried to distract me. I used that same calm now. On the cart sat my flute and an empty one, and beside them Linda's glass, already poured. When no one was watching, I slid my hand and traded my champagne for Linda's. It was a tiny switch, the kind you could miss if you blinked, but my heart felt it like a hammer. I did not know what was in my glass or why Vanessa had touched it. I only knew I had to see the shape of the danger before it reached me, and I could not blow up my son's life with a public accusation if I was wrong. I picked up the microphone again. My voice was clear. To work, I said, and to the people who carried me when I was too tired to carry myself. Everyone lifted their drinks. Linda took a bright, generous sip and laughed at something Marcus said. Vanessa watched me over the rim of her empty flute, her smile fixed in place, her fingers white around the stem. I felt the weight of the room settle back into music and small talk. Then, within minutes, she, Linda, touched her collar as if the air had thickened. Her cheeks flushed. Her words slid together. The pianist kept playing, but the notes sounded far away. I set down my glass, crossed the room, and caught Linda's elbow as her knees softened. In that small, hot second, all my victory felt like paper. The night I had planned as a gentle end had become the beginning of something harder, and I was the only one who knew why. The room did not shatter. It bent. The jazz thinned into a nervous ribbon while I steadied Linda with one hand and waved the other for water. Her skin felt damp, like a glass left on a coaster. She tried to tell me she was fine, that the room was warm, that the mousse was sweeter than she expected, but her words tangled and fell. Marcus slid platters aside to clear space on the buffet. Grace knelt with napkins and a cool cloth. I counted Linda's breaths and the tiny beats at her wrists the way I once counted server pings at 2 in the morning. I heard my own voice telling her to focus on my eyes, to stay with me, to breathe in and out like the tide on a flat lake. In the corner, Vanessa stood very still, a statue with perfect posture. Eric fumbled with his phone, and then I heard the operator's calm reply. Help was on the way. The paramedics arrived with soft shoes and efficient hands. They asked questions in plain language: what she ate, what she drank, if she used any medications. I watched Vanessa stare at the patterned rug as if the answer might be woven there. I said the word champagne and felt it hang in the air like a bell. I did not say I had seen the shimmer. I did not say I had switched the glasses. I was not ready to drop that stone into the water and watch the waves hit each person I loved. In that moment, my job was not to solve a crime. My job was to keep a woman breathing. At the hospital in Boston, fluorescent lights washed everything the same pale color. Linda was wheeled through double doors, and we were given plastic chairs and paper cups. The nurse told us it looked like a sedative mixed with alcohol, and the word sedative felt both small and sharp, like a tack underfoot. I signed forms because I am good at forms. I gave my card to the billing desk and told them to copy it, and if anyone wondered why, I said plainly, because I can. The amount did not matter. The last numbers I saw at my company were $23 million, and after a number like that, a hospital bill looks like a rounding error. This is America. Emergencies come with receipts, and tonight I would pay them. Eric sat across from me, elbows on knees, eyes heavy with a fear only a son shows his mother when he forgets to be brave. "Mom, what do you think is happening?" he asked, and I felt the delicate bridge of 1,000 days of trust stretch between us. I thought of Vanessa at the cart, of the smooth tilt of her hand. I swallowed the answer and gave him a different truth. "I think we wait for a doctor, and then we listen." He nodded, relieved to be told what to do, the way my team once waited for me to say, deploy or roll back. Minutes moved like molasses. Grace brought coffee that tasted like cardboard. Marcus texted updates to Evelyn back in Denver. Mr. Bennett arrived from the party, sober and steady, his tie already loosened. He sat beside me and asked if I wanted him there. I said yes, not as a lawyer, but as a witness to my life, someone to remember my face if the story twisted again. Across the room, Vanessa paced with small, careful steps. When she passed near, the air seemed to cool. She asked if I needed anything. I met her eyes and said, "I need the truth." She blinked once and looked down at her phone as if a message had arrived. A doctor came to us with kind eyes and numbers. Blood pressure, oxygen, a likely sedative. They would watch Linda overnight, give fluids, and expect her to wake with a foggy memory and a heavy head. No lasting harm if the pill was what they thought it was. Relief moved through the room like a breeze through curtains. But relief is not the same as trust. I thanked the doctor, signed another form, and stood. I told Eric to go home with Vanessa and rest. He hesitated, caught between me and his wife. I touched his shoulder. "Go," I said, and I used the voice I once used in meetings when two good choices fought for the same hour. He went. When the nurses dimmed the waiting room lights, I took a last look at the double doors. I knew what I had seen, and I knew what I had done. I had switched the glasses. I could not unknow it. In the cab back to the brownstone, the city glowed in quiet grids, the way Boston always does when the wind comes off the water. I watched the meter climb and thought of meters that do not stop, interest rates, suspicion, the cost of silence. By the time I reached the house, I had made 3 decisions. First, I would write everything down while it was still fresh. Second, I would call my attorney in the morning and speak without flinching. Third, I would ask Vanessa to meet me in Chicago, in my house with the blue door and the creaky stair, under the roof where my life began and where it could hold my next choice. I am a woman in America who built something and sold it. I can also build a truth and stand in it. I flew home to Chicago before sunrise, back to my brick house with the blue door and the creaky third stair, and wrote everything down at the walnut table. I wrote the time of the toast, the way Vanessa's hand hovered, the faint shimmer that fell into my champagne, the switch with Linda's flute, and the exact questions the paramedics asked. I listed small things too. The brand of the champagne, the $200 tip to the pianist in Boston, the plate of lemon mousse I never finished. It felt like building a ledger for a different kind of company, one where the product was truth and the overhead was sleep. By noon, Detective Mara Quinn knocked. She wore a gray suit, rain on the shoulders, and carried a notebook scarred by other people's nights. She asked me to speak plainly. I did. I told her about the powder and the switch. I did not embroider. I did not spare myself. When I finished, she sat quiet for a beat, then said, "Thank you." She explained the hospital's early results. A common sleep aid mixed with alcohol, strong enough to fold a person in half, but not strong enough to steal a life. She asked if anyone might want to make me look unwell. I thought of the number $23 million, the way it makes strangers call you ma'am and families study your face. I told her about the sale. She nodded, as if money were a character she knew well. After she left, I walked the house. I touched the pantry door where Eric's height marks still climbed in pencil, and the window seat where I had written my first lines of code while eating $8 pizza from a paper box. The garage smelled like cold metal and old victories. Money can repaint a room, but it can't change the grain in the wood. I brewed coffee and called Mr. Bennett. He said, "Document. Do not accuse in public. Speak to your son in private." He also told me to keep receipts for everything, car rides, meals, even the $14 parking stub at the hospital, because when stories get contested, paper becomes a witness. I texted Eric to meet me halfway in Cleveland. The highway felt like a long breath. At a diner with chrome stools and a jukebox that still ate quarters, he arrived looking tired and earnest, the version of him I held in my mind when the world tried to redraw him. He ordered black coffee and an omelet. I ordered tea I didn't touch. He said Linda was resting, and the doctors expected a full recovery. He asked what I saw. I looked at the sugar packets, lined like thin books, and told him the truth. I watched Vanessa slip something into my champagne. I switched glasses with Linda. I do not know why I did not shout. He pressed his hands flat on the table, as if he could smooth the night by force. Then he told me about the debt. Some from Vanessa's first startup in New York that failed just shy of revenue. Some from a glossy apartment the two of them kept to look investable. Some from credit cards that smile until the bill comes. He said there was a private loan at 18%, $120,000 that grows teeth each month. He said they thought I would offer help after the sale. I asked if they had asked. He said no. The space between, "I thought you would offer," and "I was waiting for you to ask," is wide enough to swallow a family. I told him I would help, but not without honesty. He nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. The choreography of a man caught between love and pride. On the drive back to Chicago, I stopped at the lake and let the wind lift my hair. I thought about the price of silence. On the ledger of my life, last night had cost me trust and $500 in hospital donations, and maybe a little of Eric's certainty that his mother could fix anything. But it had also bought me clarity. I could build companies. I could also build terms. Before dark, I called Vanessa and asked her to meet me at my house the next day. She said yes too fast. I texted Detective Quinn and told her I would speak with Vanessa privately and would not hide what I learned. The detective replied with a single line, "Don't negotiate alone." I invited Grace to sit in the living room as quiet ballast. I set out water, not wine. I put my phone on the table and a blank notepad beside it. I wrote a number at the top. £0, a reminder that I owed no one anything I could not name. Still, I am a mother in America. I know money can be a bridge if built with weight-bearing words. When the house settled and the furnace clicked on, I walked the rooms and turned off lights one by one. In the blue of the hallway, I whispered my plan to the walls. Ask for the truth, offer a path, protect Eric, and keep the doors of justice and mercy both unlocked. Tomorrow would test whether we were a family or only people connected by contracts and holidays. I went to bed with my ledger on the nightstand, the creak in the stair like a familiar warning. Step with care, step with purpose, step where the wood still holds. Morning in America can feel like a reset, even when the past sits heavy on the kitchen table. I brewed coffee in my Chicago house with a blue door and the creaky third stair, laid out 3 glasses of water, and opened the windows to the cold. Grace arrived first, steady as a lighthouse, taking the armchair that faced the walnut table without blocking the door. "You're not alone," she said, and I heard the ballast in her voice. I placed my phone, a pen, and a yellow notepad in front of my seat. On the first line, I wrote the quiet headline of my morning: "Truth, then help." The doorbell rang again. Vanessa stepped in with a pale face and no ring, followed by my son Eric, who looked like a man bracing for a verdict. We sat. The house listened. "I'm going to speak plainly," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to a woman who had signed a sale for $23 million and still remembered how to fix a printer. "At the party in Boston, I saw you slip something into my champagne, Vanessa." I switched my glass with Linda's. "She fell ill. The hospital found a sedative." I let the word sit until the room stopped vibrating. Eric stared at his hands. Vanessa pressed her lips together and shook once, like a person standing on a dock as the boat pulls away. "I bought the pills online," she said. "They were cheap, $29. I told myself it was harmless, just enough to make you woozy so you'd lean on me for a week. I thought if you needed me, you'd be more open to a loan." I never meant for Linda to drink it. She twisted a tissue until it looked like a white rope. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the table and then to me. "I was drowning. The debt." Her voice broke and found itself again. "We were stupid with the apartment in New York. The interest is teeth. I didn't ask you because I was ashamed." Shame explains. It doesn't excuse. "Thank you for telling the truth," I said. "Now hear mine. I love my son. I wanted to believe I misread the shimmer. I also wanted to know what I was dealing with before I placed a charge that would split us. That is why I switched the glasses. I won't pretend that choice was clean." Eric lifted his head, and for an instant I saw him at 15, asking if the dent in the car would buff out. "Mom," he started. I raised my hand, not to silence him, but to frame what came next. "These are my terms," I said, and I read them from the page. 1. You will give a full statement to Detective Mara Quinn, the same truth you just spoke here. 2. You will apologize to Linda in person and pay every expense tied to that night, ambulance, tests, follow-ups, to the last cent. If the total ends at $4,780 or £3,900, you will cover it all. 3. You and Eric will see a counselor for a year. I'll help you find one in Chicago or Cleveland, wherever you can attend without excuse. 4. If you keep those terms for 12 months, I will create a trust of $150,000 to retire the worst of the debt, dispersed in 3 verified installments tied to counseling attendance and a budget you both sign. 5. If any part is broken, I will cooperate fully with the investigation. There are no secret clauses. Silence is a kind of arithmetic. You feel the numbers move. Vanessa nodded once, then again, the way a person learns a rhythm. "I'll do it," she said. She sounded smaller, but also more solid, as if truth had given her a floor. Eric looked at me with wet eyes. "Thank you," he said, and it wasn't the thanks of a man for money. It was the thanks of a son for a bridge not burned. Grace exhaled, and the house seemed to release a long-held breath. I called Detective Quinn on speaker. I told her Vanessa was ready to make a full statement. The detective's voice came cool and humane from Boston. "I can record this afternoon. Restorative options remain if the victim agrees." After we hung up, I dialed Linda. She answered with the warmth of a woman who keeps her kindness polished. I told her the truth and my terms. There was a pause long enough to hear the clock in my hallway. "I do not want Vanessa in prison," Linda said at last. "I want her better. I want my daughter and my son-in-law to grow up. Bring them to me tomorrow. I'll hear the apology in my kitchen." By evening, I walked the neighborhood while Eric and Vanessa stared down their budget at the table. The lake wind tasted like metal and promise. I thought about numbers again. $23 million is a door, but it's also a mirror. $150,000 is a handrail if you grab it with both hands. $29 can be the price of a bad idea. At the corner, I turned back to my house, its windows gold in the early dark. The blue door held steady. Inside, pen scratched. Somewhere, a counselor's phone would soon ring. Tomorrow, an apology would cross a different kitchen table. I am a woman in America who knows how to write terms and keep them. Mercy isn't weakness when it comes with ledger lines. Justice isn't rage when it remembers the lives it touches. When I climbed the stairs, the third step sang its familiar note. I paused there, listening to the old would speak. Then I moved on, not lighter, but clearer, carrying the contract I had written between love and law.